Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The restaurant's soft lighting, the clinking of glasses, and the low hum of Friday night conversations should have made a night to remember. Brandon Carter had chosen this spot to celebrate the final countdown to his wedding with Melissa Hayes, the woman he believed he would spend the rest of his life with. He had been working long hours at his architecture firm, pulling double shifts to cover expenses for the kind of wedding Melissa had always dreamed of. She loved grand gestures, sparkling chandeliers, and the kind of moments she could plaster across social media with hashtags like #DreamWedding and #LuckyBride. But as dessert arrived, Melissa leaned back in her chair with a look that wasn't joy. It was calculation. She swirled her wine and said with an icy casualness that made Brandon's chest tighten, "I've decided something about the ceremony. I want Ryan to be my man of honor." Brandon blinked. The name Ryan wasn't just any name. It was the ex-boyfriend she had once called her soulmate. The same Ryan who had cheated on her in college. The same Ryan whose shadow still haunted their arguments when Melissa compared Brandon's stability to Ryan's reckless charm. He set down his fork slowly. "You mean your ex-Ryan?" Melissa smiled, as if daring him to question her. "Yes. He knows me better than anyone. He's been there through everything. If you can't accept that, then maybe we shouldn't even have a wedding." The words didn't just sting, they detonated inside him. He glanced around the restaurant, catching glimpses of other couples laughing, toasting, living in some simpler version of love. He wondered what they'd think if they heard this ultimatum. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. "So that's the choice. Either I let your ex stand beside you on our wedding day, or we call this off." Melissa crossed her arms. "Exactly. If you really loved me, you trust me." But Brandon wasn't a fool. He'd already noticed her phone lighting up with Ryan's name late at night. The way her tone softened when she accidentally brought him up, the secret smile she thought he didn't see. He had ignored the warning signs, telling himself he was just paranoid. Tonight, he realized paranoia had simply been the truth whispering in his ear. He didn't shout. He didn't cause a scene. Instead, Brandon sat back in his chair, exhaled, and gave a small nod. "All right, if that's your decision, then I've got mine." Melissa's eyes lit up, thinking she'd won. But she didn't know Brandon. Not really. She didn't know the patience of a man who built entire skyscrapers, who mapped every line and measurement until his vision became reality. She didn't know that his silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That night, after dropping Melissa off, Brandon didn't go home. He went straight to his office, the blueprints of his revenge already unfolding in his mind. He pulled up contracts, payments, reservations, and with a few clicks, the entire wedding Melissa had been boasting about online was gone. Venue canceled. Catering refunded. Guests quietly informed that the celebration was postponed indefinitely. And when Brandon wired half the deposits back into his account, he drafted one last invoice for Melissa. Every dollar he had invested into her dream wedding, itemized with cold precision. The next morning, an envelope with her name on it waited on her doorstep. Melissa's confidence would collapse when she realized the fairy tale she thought she controlled was now rubble at her feet. But the true twist was still waiting. Ryan would soon learn that he wasn't just walking back into Melissa's life. He was walking into the wreckage Brandon had designed for him. Melissa's morning began with the shrill ping of her phone. Dozens of notifications flooded in. Canceled reservations, messages from confused bridesmaids, and relatives asking what was happening. At first, she thought it was a glitch. But then her eyes caught the thick white envelope taped to her front door. Inside was a letter typed neatly, every line sharp and deliberate. "Melissa, since you've made your choice, I've made mine. Attached is an itemized bill for every deposit, every down payment, every detail I financed. The balance owed, $23,460. Since your man of honor means so much to you, he can help cover it. Best regards, Brandon." Melissa's hands trembled. Her lips moved, whispering. He wouldn't dare. But he already had. By mid-afternoon, the dream wedding she had paraded across Instagram was gone. The venue she boasted about, canceled. The dress alteration she flaunted, suspended. The luxury photographer she bragged about, booked elsewhere. And the refund Brandon secured, It wasn't hers to reclaim. He had pulled it back to his account, leaving her to face the debts she had pushed onto him with careless entitlement. But the worst blow came when she called Ryan. "Ryan, it's Melissa. You won't believe what Brandon did. He canceled everything. The wedding, the guests, the—" Ryan chuckled on the other end, a sound that twisted like a knife. "So what? That's his problem. I thought you wanted me there, front and center. Remember? You said you'd handle him. Don't tell me you lost control already." Melissa's stomach knotted. I didn't think he'd actually do it." Ryan's tone turned cold. "If you want me involved, then figure it out. But I'm not paying for your mess." Click. The call ended. Melissa sank onto her couch, staring at the unpaid bill in her lap. She had tried to manipulate Brandon with her usual tactics: tears, ultimatums, emotional games. But for the first time, he hadn't bent. He hadn't argued. He had simply walked away, leaving her scrambling. Meanwhile, Brandon sat in his office, sipping coffee, the morning sun casting sharp light across the paperwork spread before him. He wasn't celebrating. Not yet. His mind replayed every moment Melissa had made him feel small, rolling her eyes when he worked late, comparing him to Ryan's adventurous spirit, dismissing his practical love as boring. For years, he had silenced his doubts, convincing himself stability was enough for her. But her ultimatum was proof. She didn't want stability. She wanted spectacle, no matter the cost. At lunch, Brandon's friend and colleague, Mark Donovan, dropped by. Mark had been his confidant through the rocky months of planning. "You look like a man who just leveled the playing field," Mark said, dropping into the chair across from him. Brandon gave a humorless smile. "I just gave her exactly what she asked for, a choice. She picked Ryan. Let him deal with her now." Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. "We're around town. Is Ryan's not exactly loyal these days? You sure she's not already tangled back up with him?" Brandon's jaw tightened. He had wondered the same. The late-night texts, the sudden trips to see friends, the way her phone screen lit up with Ryan's name only to be flipped over when Brandon walked in. It all painted a picture he had tried to ignore. Now, he had no reason to ignore it anymore. 2 days later, Brandon got his answer. He walked into a downtown hotel bar after a late client meeting, only to freeze at the sight across the room. Melissa, dressed in a sleek black dress, was leaning far too close to Ryan. Their laughter carried above the clinking glasses, their hands brushing on the counter. When Ryan's hand rested on the small of her back, Melissa didn't flinch. She leaned into it. Brandon's chest burned, but not with heartbreak. He was past that. This was validation. The betrayal he had suspected wasn't a theory anymore. It was happening in plain view. Melissa hadn't seen him, but another set of eyes had. A tall brunette woman at a corner table rose and approached him. She looked hesitant, almost nervous. "Brandon," she whispered. He blinked. "Do I know you?" "I'm Emily," she said quickly, glancing toward Melissa and Ryan. "Ryan's sister. I've been watching them for weeks. You don't deserve this. And honestly, neither do I. He's been using me as an excuse to cover their meetups, telling his girlfriend he's visiting me when he's really here with Melissa." Brandon stared, the weight of her words sinking in. "Girlfriend?" Emily nodded, her expression grim. "Ryan's been with someone else for over a year. He's stringing Melissa along, and she's letting him. It's ugly. But I thought you should know." For a moment, the room tilted. Brandon wasn't surprised. He was furious. Furious at himself for doubting his instincts. Furious at Melissa for her arrogance. Furious at Ryan for treating everyone around him like pawns at his game. But under the fury was clarity. He looked at Emily, his voice steady but sharp. "Then it's time I stop playing their game. If Ryan wants to take my place, then he can take the full weight of it. The bills, the responsibilities, the fallout. Melissa thinks she's in control, but she has no idea the ground under her feet is already gone." Emily hesitated, then leaned closer. "If you're planning something, I want in. I've had enough of Ryan's lies. And if Melissa is willing to destroy her own wedding for him, maybe she deserves what's coming too." Brandon's lips curved into the first real smile in days. "Then let's make sure they pay their own price." That night, Brandon drafted a new plan. The canceled wedding was only the opening move. Now, with Emily's help, he would pull apart the illusion Melissa and Ryan thought they controlled. Every deception, every lie, every stolen moment. They would all come back, piece by piece, until Melissa's perfect image shattered in front of everyone she had tried to impress. And the best part, they would never see it coming until it was too late. The following week, Melissa strutted into her office as if nothing had happened. Her coworkers whispered about the canceled wedding, but Melissa brushed it off with a rehearsed smile. Just a scheduling issue, she told them, tossing her hair like the queen of spin. Everything's under control. What she didn't know was that Brandon had already begun weaving the threads of his revenge tighter. With Emily's inside knowledge of Ryan's habits, Brandon was 2 steps ahead of them at every turn. Melissa and Ryan's secret rendezvous continued in dim hotel lounges and out-of-the-way cafes. They believed they were being clever, but Brandon had the receipts, literally. Emily tipped him off to Ryan's carelessness, like signing tabs with his actual name or using the same credit card tied to his official accounts. Brandon didn't storm in. He didn't confront. Instead, he collected proof like an architect gathers materials, each piece precise, measured, and waiting for the right foundation. One Friday evening, Melissa showed up at Brandon's apartment unannounced. Her eyes were wide, her voice sharp with desperation. "You humiliated me," she snapped, shoving the envelope of bills back at him. "Do you have any idea how cruel that was? People are laughing at me." Brandon remained calm, leaning against the counter. "I gave you what you asked for, Melissa. You wanted Ryan at the wedding. You wanted him in our lives. Congratulations, you got him. And now you also get the bill." Her face flushed red. "Ryan's not paying for anything. He doesn't have to." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "Oh, but he will. Because when he finds out just how much this wedding cost, and how much you promised me he'd step in for, you'll see exactly where his loyalty lies." Melissa faltered, her confidence cracking. "I never said that. You didn't need to." Brandon's tone was icy. "Ryan thinks he's charming enough to walk into our lives and take over. But I'm not the one he'll disappoint. You are." For the first time, Melissa didn't have a comeback. She turned and stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the hallway tile. The very next day, Brandon executed the second phase of his plan. He sent copies of the canceled contracts, the invoices, and the balance owed directly to Ryan's email, under Melissa's name. Alongside them, he attached screenshots of text messages Emily had forwarded, proving Melissa had been sneaking around with Ryan behind Brandon's back for months, even while wedding planning was in full swing. The subject line was brutal in its simplicity. "Since you wanted to be part of the wedding, here are your responsibilities." Ryan's reaction was volcanic. 2 nights later, Emily called Brandon. "He's furious. I heard him shouting at Melissa on the phone. Something about being tricked into footing the bill, about her promising him money she doesn't even have." Brandon felt no satisfaction, only grim justice. He wanted the role. Now he gets the burden. But he wasn't finished. The following weekend, Melissa's family gathered for what was supposed to be a bridal shower. Instead of a glowing bride-to-be, Melissa arrived late, eyes swollen from crying, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. The room buzzed with relatives whispering about the vanished venue, the refunded guests, and a mystery of why Ryan wasn't present. Brandon, however, was there. He had been invited weeks ago, before everything imploded, and he showed up not with anger, but with evidence. He calmly slid a folder across the table to Melissa's father, who had helped front some early wedding deposits. Inside were receipts, emails, and pictures, undeniable proof of Melissa and Ryan's betrayal, as well as the financial disaster she had left behind. Her father's face drained of color as he read. "Melissa, is this true?" Melissa stammered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Dad, I can explain." But Brandon cut her off, his voice sharp and final. "There's nothing to explain. You gambled with my trust, with our future, and with everyone's money. You thought Ryan would save you. But here's the truth. He's already running from you. And now, everyone sees you for who you really are." The room fell silent. Even Melissa's closest friends avoided her gaze. She had built her identity on the illusion of control, of being the perfect bride with the perfect love story. In one evening, Brandon dismantled it all, piece by piece, leaving her reputation in ruins. Melissa tried to lash out, her voice cracking. "You're cruel, Brandon. You've destroyed me." Brandon's expression was stone. "No, Melissa, you destroyed yourself. I just stepped out of the way." And as he left the gathering, the weight that had hung on his shoulders for months finally lifted. He had loved her once, deeply, but love without respect, without loyalty, was nothing but a hollow structure destined to collapse. What Melissa didn't yet realize, though, was that the collapse wasn't over. Brandon had one final card to play, and it would strike Ryan exactly where it hurt most. Ryan Mitchell had always prided himself on being the man who could talk his way out of anything. Smooth words, a confident smile. He had left a trail of broken hearts, but always managed to charm his way forward. But this time, he was cornered. When Brandon's email with invoices and proof of Melissa's betrayal hit his inbox, Ryan's world tilted. He thought Melissa had promised him glamour, a wedding dripping in attention, and a chance to stand victorious in front of the man she once called too boring. Instead, all he saw were bills, debts, and Melissa's reckless lies. And Melissa, desperate, angry, and humiliated, wouldn't stop calling him. "Ryan, you have to help me," she pleaded over the phone one late night. "It's your fault, too. You said you'd stand by me." Ryan snapped. "Stand by you? You told me Brandon was footing the bill. I never agreed to pay for your fantasy. You're delusional if you think I'm covering 20 grand of debt." Melissa's voice cracked. "So you're just going to leave me like this?" "Exactly," Ryan spat. "You made your bed. Lie in it." And with that, he blocked her number. Melissa was unraveling, but Brandon wasn't finished. He knew that revenge wasn't just about exposing betrayal. It was about making sure the betrayers had to live in the ruins of their own choices. The last move came 2 weeks later. Brandon arranged a quiet dinner with Emily, Ryan's sister, and a few mutual friends who had witnessed the chaos. It wasn't a party. It was more like a verdict. As the group exchanged stories, Brandon calmly laid out the timeline. Melissa's demand to include Ryan as man of honor, the secret late-night meetings, the canceled wedding, and the debts. Then came Emily's contribution, screenshots of Ryan's text to his actual girlfriend, texts that mocked Melissa while he continued using her for attention. By the time the night ended, the truth wasn't just Brandon's burden anymore. It was common knowledge. Melissa's friends who once envied her perfect life now whispered about her downfall. Ryan's name, once charming, was dragged through conversations as nothing but a cautionary tale. Brandon never raised his voice. He never gloated. He let the facts speak louder than rage ever could. And in doing so, he turned Melissa and Ryan's betrayal into their own public undoing. Melissa's carefully curated world shattered. Vendors refused to work with her again after her reputation for failed payments spread. Family members who had invested money into the wedding cut her off. Even her social circle grew cold. No one wanted to be associated with someone whose lies were now plastered in hushed conversations across town. Ryan fared no better. His girlfriend dumped him after seeing the proof of his two-timing ways. His job, where he had leaned on his charm to climb quickly, slipped from his grasp when his behavior bled into workplace gossip. The man who once strutted into rooms with easy arrogance now avoided crowded spaces altogether. As for Brandon, he didn't celebrate with cruelty. He quietly redirected his focus back to his life. Work filled his days, friends filled his evenings, and little by little, the ache in his chest gave way to something sturdier, freedom. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking on eggshells, waiting for Melissa's moods to decide the rhythm of his life. One evening, Emily joined him for coffee. She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "You didn't just protect yourself, Brandon. You showed them who they really are, and you gave them exactly what they deserved." Brandon gave a faint smile. "I just refuse to keep playing their game." She tilted her head. "And what now? Do you think you'll ever?" He interrupted gently, his eyes steady. "Love again? Yes, but not like before. This time, it won't be about building someone else's illusion. It'll be about building something real." Emily's smile carried warmth he hadn't seen in months. For the first time since Melissa's betrayal, Brandon felt the future wasn't a battlefield. It was an open horizon. Melissa and Ryan would spend years haunted by the wreckage of their choices, but Brandon had moved on. His revenge wasn't just in the collapse of their world. It was in the quiet strength of his own rebirth. And perhaps the greatest victory was this. While they were left picking through ashes, Brandon walked away with his dignity intact and his future wide open.